Hello, good morning, Dean. We're,
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. We're starting in 4 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah, it's very good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thanks for allocating your time amidst your busy schedule.
Yeah, I saw a Minister Erlangga
Yep.
in Davos. I met
Oh,
him in.
yes. Erwin told me, so it's very good that you had a chance
Yeah, we
to
took
do
some
that.
pictures together.
Right. It's wonderful. When do you have any plans to meet him again soon, or come to Indonesia yet?
Yeah, no, I'm actually traveling again, but I'm traveling to Europe mainly. I'm going to Zurich next week
Right.
and going to Bangkok the week after.
Wonderful.
But I want to come to Jakarta too. Yeah.
Yes. We should definitely plan it out. The Golkar Institute training app, we did a soft launching this Monday. With some videos. Basically, we are already announcing people to register for the training app. So we have many registrations, thousands of registrations so far, and so they will be among the first persons who will get access to the training app. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. And we are actually the team is also traveling to Malaysia next week to record Tun Dr. Mahathir Muhammad.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right. Wonderful. All right, Dean. So we'll start in 2 minutes. Let me just make sure the preparations are all set.
Sure.
All right. So, Dean Kishore, I will open the event in Bahasa Indonesia for 1 minute, and then I will switch to speaking to English.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Teman-teman semua peserta Executive Education for Young Political Leaders Angkatan ke-7 dan rekan-rekan yang mengikuti acara ini. Selamat pagi, ini adalah rangkaian dari kegiatan pelatihan bagi pemimpin politik muda Indonesia yang diselenggarakan oleh Golkar Institute yang kali ini telah memasuki sesi atau angkatan yang ke-7. Nah, sebagai bagian dari rangkaian pelatihan yang berlangsung selama 1 minggu tersebut, kita mengadakan beberapa public lectures dan salah satunya adalah public lecture tentang geopolitik, kondisi geopolitik dunia dan bagaimana seharusnya peran Indonesia. Public lecture ini dibawakan oleh Profesor Kishore Mahbubani dan akan dibawakan dalam bahasa Inggris. Saya membuka dalam bahasa Indonesia dan sesudah ini saya akan berganti ke bahasa Inggris. Tanya jawab juga akan dilakukan dalam bahasa Inggris, tapi kalau dari peserta ada yang ingin bertanyakan dalam bahasa Indonesia tidak apa-apa, nanti saya akan bantu sampaikan dalam bahasa Inggris. Sekarang saya akan berganti menggunakan bahasa Inggris. Good morning everyone and welcome to the public lecture on world geopolitical conditions and its implications for Indonesia. This public lecture is conducted as part of the events that make up the Executive Education Program for Young Political Leaders. This program has been run by Golkar Institute for 7 batches now, and we are now in the 7th batch. The first batch was conducted in April of 2021, and it is a publicly open training in which we conduct recruitment from the public and the participants are selected. So the participants here in the classroom, there are 42 people of us who are selected through a competitive process. And among the 42 participants here, 8 people are members or heads of the local parliaments in Indonesia at the city or the province level. And of course, aside from that, we also have people from NGOs, from mass organizations, as well as researchers. Not everyone is affiliated with Golkar already, so about 25% of our participants is not currently affiliated with Golkar or with any other political party. So, to start, let me first introduce Professor Kishore Mahbubani. So, I have been very honored to have the pleasure of interacting with Professor Mahbubani directly as a student of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. At that time, I was a PhD student, and Professor Kishore Mahbubani, he was my dean. So I'm very honored for that. But before his career as an academic, Professor Mahbubani is a diplomat. So he has had a long career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Singapore. He was twice the ambassador of Singapore to the United Nations. And in 2001 to 2002, he was also the chief of the United Nations Security Council. And then after his career with the Ministry of Foreign Service, he joined academia and he was the founding dean. He founded the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, which until now has become one of the top public policy schools in the world. And I've had a chance to also work with Professor Mahbubani as a researcher within that school. Of course, Professor Mahbubani is a very prolific writer as well. He has been known for many of his books, which some say are thought-provoking. And some of his books, among the earliest books is provocatively titled, Can Asians Think? And of course, he has many books. Among those that have touched me the most are that, as well as The New Asian Hemisphere, talking about the rise of Asia. And of course, there's also Has China Won, among the very questions that many of us are thinking today. Has China won? And his latest book, of course, it's actually free and available on the internet. It's called The Asian 21st Century, and it has been downloaded millions of times already. So it is with great pleasure here that we have the presence of Professor Kishore Mahbubani, who will talk to us, enlighten us about what is the current world geopolitical conditions. Of course, we have the tensions between a rising China and the United States, but now we also have the situation, this war going on in Ukraine, in which we have tensions between NATO with Russia, and how it has impacted the world, especially in terms of rising prices. And of course, this year, 2022, is the year when Indonesia is the president of the G20, which will happen in Bali later on this year. How will that impact Indonesia's role as the presidency of the G20? These are questions that I think we can all think about as we listen to Professor Mahbubani's speech and lecture. And of course, I'm looking forward to having a great discussion with you all. And with that introduction, I would like everyone to give a very warm round of applause for Professor Kishore Mahbubani. Dean, thank you very much for being here. I would also like to mention that Professor Kishore Mahbubani, among the many different roles that he has kindly agreed to become the one of the advisors, Golkar Institute advisor. So please give a round of applause for Golkar Institute advisor for Professor Mahbubani. Good morning, Dean. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And let's start the lecture. As usual, we have about 45 minutes for lecture and about the same time for question and answers. So please, Dean, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mulya, for that very generous introduction. I really deeply appreciate it. And I want to say that the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy is very happy to have Dr. Mulya as one of its graduates. You know, schools are very proud of their successful graduates. And Dr. Mulya is one of our most successful graduates, and we are very happy to celebrate Dr. Mulya's success also. I'm very, very happy to speak to you today. As you said, Mulya will have about maybe 40 minutes for the lecture, although I may speak just a bit less to give more time for Q&A. And then we'll have the remaining time for the Q&A. But I have to end at, unfortunately, at 10 a.m. your time sharp, because I have another appointment downtown at 10:30. So I have to finish at 10 a.m. So I'm going to talk, as you said, Mulya, about the geopolitics of our time. And I'm glad that you mentioned Ukraine, because what Ukraine shows very clearly is that if you don't understand the forces of geopolitics, the results are disastrous. The results are you get a war. And I would say that the Ukraine war is a result of the geopolitical incompetence of all the European states. And here there's actually an organization called OSCE, Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe. It includes all the EU member states. It includes Russia. And it has failed. It has failed in its responsibility to keep peace. And I want to emphasize one thing. The Europeans believe that they are advanced, developed states, and they are. Domestically, they are advanced and developed. But in geopolitics, they are retarded because they have allowed this war to happen. And so for us in Asia, I want to emphasize, especially to my friends from Indonesia, that we must remember that actually the biggest wars after the end of World War II in 1945 have not been fought in Europe. They've been fought in East Asia, including in our region, Southeast Asia. You had the Vietnam War, you had the Korean War, you had the Sino-Vietnamese War. So it's very important, therefore, for us to understand that peace is not necessarily a natural condition. Peace requires hard work and dedication and shrewdness to achieve peace. And so we in Southeast Asia, therefore, must develop a very good understanding of the geopolitical forces that are affecting our region, because the geopolitical forces affecting Southeast Asia are different from the geopolitical forces affecting Europe. And in Europe, there was a geopolitical contest essentially between United States and Russia. And since the European Union member states didn't manage this geopolitical contest well, you got war in Ukraine. So similarly, in our region, in Southeast Asia, the biggest geopolitical contest is not between United States and Russia. The biggest geopolitical contest in our region is between United States and China. And that's why we have to understand it. Because if we don't understand this geopolitical contest, we will end up with war in our region, and we will end up, as I'll explain later, with a potential proxy war. So therefore, I want to tell you all that this is the reason why you must study very carefully what's happening within US and China. And that's why also I wrote this book, Has China Won? And I hope you'll get a chance to look at it sometime also. Now, to explain this US-China geopolitical contest, I'm going to divide my remarks into 5 parts. The part 1, I'll explain the structural forces that are driving this contest. Part 2, I'll talk about the mistakes made between the United States and China, which have also contributed to this contest. Number 3, I'll discuss the question, who will win? Will the United States win or will China win? I'm sure that you will find that an interesting question. Part 4, I will discuss what do other countries think about this contest. And part 5, I will discuss how we can prevent worst case scenarios, like, for example, wars between US and China. So these are the 5 parts I'll try to cover in the next 30 minutes or so. So let me begin by talking about the structural forces driving this contest. And I want to highlight 3 structural forces. The first structural force driving this contest is a 2,000-year rule of geopolitics. Now, I want to emphasize that geopolitics has been around for thousands of years. There's nothing new in geopolitics. Everything happening today, we have seen before, right? Including in the war in Ukraine. You've seen that before too. So, in the case of United States and China, there is like an iron law of geopolitics, which says that whenever the world's number 2 power, which today is China, is about to overtake the world's number 1 power, which today is United States, the world's number 1 power always pushes down the world's number 2 power, always. And so this has been happening for thousands of years. So what the United States is doing, therefore, is logical, it's predictable. It's what all great powers would do. And frankly, if China was number 1 and United States was number 2, then China would try to push down the United States if it's number 2. This is perfectly normal behavior. That's how great powers behave. And I want to mention that because, of course, the United States gives all kinds of other reasons for this contest, and we will discuss them. But I want you all to know that it is not driven by personalities, it's not driven by ideologies, it's driven by the iron law of geopolitics. And in fact, in my book, Has China Won? If you look at paragraph 1 of my book, which was written in 2020, when President Trump was president, I said, this US-China geopolitical contest has been launched by Donald Trump, but it will carry on even after Donald Trump goes. And sure enough, Donald Trump lost the elections in November 2020. Joe Biden was elected. Joe Biden said, I'm going to change everything that Trump has done. And he changed a lot of things. But on China, Joe Biden hasn't changed anything. He's all the trade war that Donald Trump started against China is still carrying on. No change. So it proves my point that this geopolitical contest is not driven by personalities. It's driven by a deep structural force, the Iron Law of Geopolitics, which has been around for 2,000 years. So even after, if Joe Biden doesn't win the elections again in 2024, no matter which president comes in the United States, this contest will carry on. You see, personalities don't matter. This is the Iron Law of Geopolitics. So that's the first structural force. The first one, by the way, first structural force, many people acknowledge, and Americans have written about it. There's a Harvard professor called Graham Allison, who's written a book called Destined for War that documents why this happens throughout history. But the second structural force, if the first one everybody knows, the second one nobody talks about. And the second one is an emotional force, which I call the fear of the yellow peril. Now you're probably wondering, what is yellow peril? What is yellow peril? Well, I can tell you that for almost 800 years, since the Mongols almost conquered Europe, I think in the 13th century, the Western mind, the European mind, is very frightened of being invaded and occupied by what they call the yellow hordes, or being conquered by the yellow people. And this yellow peril has existed in the Western imagination and keeps surfacing from time to time. Now, if any American tells you that there is no such thing as the yellow peril, doesn't exist, ask the American a very simple question. Ask him why in the 1890s, I'm going to repeat this, 1890s, this is 130 years ago. 130 years ago, the US Congress passed a law called the Chinese Racial Exclusion Act. Chinese Racial Exclusion Act. And why did the United States Congress want to keep Chinese from coming to America? Because it was the fear of the yellow peril. And as an aside, let me mention that when I lived in New York in the 1980s, the United States wasn't frightened of China. China was a good friend of the United States in the 1980s. United States was worried about Japan, that Japan might become stronger than US. And so there was anti-Japanese sentiment which came out in the yellow peril also. So that's the second structural force. And the third structural force that's driving this contest, and which the Americans use as a rationale for this contest, is the belief in the United States that China has disappointed the US. Now, how has China disappointed the US? Well, two scholars, Kurt Campbell and Ellie Redner, and I cite them in my book, Has China Won, have published an article in magazine Foreign Affairs saying that the United States engaged China, the United States opened up China's economy, and the United States expected that after the United States opens up China's economy, China would then open up its political system and become like the United States of America, a liberal democratic society. Now, I'm not exaggerating this. This is the belief that Americans had about China. And it's confirmed by Kurt Campbell and Ari Vetman. And so that's why you notice the Americans, when you ask the Americans, why are you quarreling with China? They say, well, as you know, as President Joe Biden has said, he said this. This is a clash between democracies and autocracies. United States is a democracy, China is an autocracy, and therefore there's an ideological clash. And this is why the Americans justify what they're doing against China. But of course, we can discuss later whether this is a reasonable expectation. But I can tell you that future historians will be very puzzled by this American expectation that America would transform China. And they will be puzzled because they say the United States the United States, by the way, as a country, is less than 250 years old. China has been around for 4,000 years. And China's population is 4 times the size of United States population. So how could the United States believe that when a 250-year-old child deals with a 4,000-year-old civilization, this 250-year-old child is going to transform the 4,000-year-old civilization? So clearly there's a lot of arrogance in this American belief, but it's real, and it also explains why the United States is standing up to China. So you can see, therefore, that this US-China geopolitical contest is not being driven by personalities, it's being driven by deep structural forces. But at the same time, I can also say that both sides have made mistakes in managing each other. So this brings me to part 2 of my lecture, where I talk about the mistakes that have been made. And I would say in the case of United States, in the case of China, the mistake that China has made has been to alienate the American business community, right? So, and I can tell you, for example, in the 80s and 90s, when China opened up its economy, the American businessmen were very happy to invest in China, make a lot of money from China, and it was win-win. Americans made money, Chinese got jobs. But what happened was that, unfortunately, some Chinese officials ill-treated these American businessmen. There was some stealing of American intellectual property. There was some bullying of American businessmen to share their technology, and so on and so forth. I document all this in my book. And this is, again, this is not a secret. If you go to the website of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, if you go to the website of the American Chamber of Commerce in Beijing, you will see all the complaints that American businessmen have had against Chinese officials. I think some of these complaints are justified. And so yeah, I would advise China to pay attention to these complaints and to deal with them. So in this contest, China has also made mistakes. But at the same time, I think in some ways, the United States has made a bigger mistake. And the big mistake the United States has made is that it has launched a geopolitical contest against China without first working out a long-term strategy on how to manage this challenge from China. Now, you may not believe this. You may think, hey, United States of America has got the best universities, the best strategic think tanks, right? The best known strategic thinkers. How can United States not have a strategy? Well, I can say this with some confidence because the man who told me that United States doesn't have a strategy is America's greatest living strategic thinker. His name is Henry Kissinger. And Henry Kissinger told me at a one-on-one lunch together that he and I had in March 2018, and this is, I can see, 4 years ago, that United States doesn't have a strategy. And of course, it's confirmed by the fact that United States has never spelled out what are the goals of its strategy vis-a-vis China, right? Because if you want to have a strategy, you must have goals. The strategy is to achieve something. And so, for example, there are three possible hypothetical goals. Number one, maybe the United States wants to overthrow the Chinese Communist Party. It cannot be done. The Chinese Communist Party is very popular. And if you want proof, you can Google and look at a Harvard Kennedy School study on the Chinese Communist Party produced by the Ash Center. And that study confirms that support for the Chinese Communist Party has gone up from 86% in 2003 to 93% in 2016. So you can see, how can you overthrow a Chinese Communist Party that is so popular? And then second thing, is the United States trying to isolate China? It cannot be done because China, unlike the old Soviet Union, actually does more trade with the rest of the world than United States does trade with the rest of the world. And China's trade is growing faster and faster. Now, for example, vis-a-vis ASEAN, let me give you this one statistic so you understand. In the year 2000, 22 years ago, US trade with ASEAN was $135 billion. So that means it was more than 3 times China's trade with ASEAN, which was only $40 billion, right? US trade was 3 times China's trade with ASEAN. But by 2020, US trade had become like $350 billion, right? But China's trade had become $800 billion, more than double that of the United States. So US trade with ASEAN, which used to be 3 times larger than ASEAN, had become half that of China's. So you cannot isolate China. China does more trade with the rest of the world and will continue to do more trade with the rest of the world than the United States does. So again, this cannot succeed. So, if you look at potential goals of the United States, there none seem to be achievable strategic goals, and therefore they confirm that the United States doesn't have a strategy. So all this brings me to part 3 of my remarks. Who will win this contest? Will it be China? Will it be United States? And here, I think, even though from what I've said so far, you can see when I say United States doesn't have a strategy, I think China has a strategy for managing the United States. It would be a mistake for China to underestimate the United States of America. Because the United States of America is still the most powerful country in the world. And United States GNP is still bigger than China's. And United States also, as you all know, has many allies around the world. So it would be clearly a mistake for China to underestimate the United States. And so, for example, I mentioned the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war has been a blessing for United States because it is sending weapons to Ukraine, and Ukraine and Russia are fighting and weakening each other. But America is not fighting. America is not weakening. So America is winning. So you can see that in the Ukraine war, the United States has been able to use its power well, and it is winning this contest without fighting. So it would be a mistake for China to underestimate the United States. And China, and in fact, if you look at chapter 1 of my book as China Won, I have a fictional memo written to Xi Jinping in which describes how there are so many strengths of the United States. And just let me give you one example. Now, China has got more people than the United States. China's got 1.4 billion people. United States has 330 million people, only 1/4 that of China. But even though China has more brains than United States has more access to brains than China does, right? Because there are 7.3 billion people in the world, and the best brains from the world go and work in the United States. That's why if you go to the United States, you'll find that some of the biggest corporations, some of the biggest companies in the United States are run by people not born in the United States. So, for example, Google, one of the world's biggest companies, is run by Sundar Pichai, who was born in India. And Microsoft, which is another big company, is run by Satya Nadella, who was also born in India. So the United States, therefore, in theory, it has a smaller population than United States, than China, but in practice, it has access to more brains than China does. So you can see, therefore, it would be a mistake for China to underestimate the United States. But at the same time, it would also be a mistake for United States to underestimate China, because China has got its own strengths also. And, so in my book, I have a chapter that says that if the Americans think that this is a contest between a democracy in United States and an autocracy in China, then it is true that democracies perform better than autocracies. But if you dig deep down and you look at the actual political structure of the United States today has gone from being a democracy towards becoming becoming a plutocracy. What is a plutocracy? A plutocracy, Plutocracy, plutocracy is not a government of the people, by the people, for the people. It is a government of the 1%, by the 1%, for the 1%. It is a government of the rich people, by the rich people, for the rich people. Now, you may think I'm exaggerating, but many leading Western minds, including the late Mr. Paul Volcker, who used to run the Fed, including the Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz, including Martin Wolf of Financial Times, they have all described the United States as a plutocracy. And by contrast, China has become a meritocracy. What is a meritocracy? Meritocracy is a society where the best people are chosen to work in the government and where the best people make good policies for the people of the country. By the way, Singapore is also a meritocracy in that sense. So therefore, if the contest, and let me repeat what I said earlier, if the contest is between a democracy and an autocracy, a democracy can win. But if the contest is between a plutocracy and a meritocracy can win. So it would be a mistake for United States to underestimate China. And therefore, both sides should treat each other with respect. So all this brings me to part 4. What do other countries in the world think? And I want to emphasize that in our world, we have about 7.8 billion people. So you have 1.4 billion people living in China, 330 million people living in the United States. That still leaves 6 billion people in the rest of the world. So what do the 6 billion people want? Do they want to support United States or do they want to support China? And what is interesting is that unlike the Cold War, in the Cold War between the United States and the former Soviet Union, more countries supported the United States. All the European states supported the United States. Japan supported the United States. South Korea supported the United States. And even major third world countries like Egypt, like Pakistan, like Indonesia, supported the United States in the Cold War, right? And by the way, during the first Cold War, even China supported the United States against the Soviet Union. So you can see in the Cold War, many countries supported the United States. But today, in the geopolitical contest between United States and China, most countries in the world want to be good friends with United States and they want to be good friends with China. And you look at most of the ASEAN states, for example, like Indonesia, like Singapore, like Malaysia, we want to be good friends with United States and we want to be good friends with China. And we don't want to choose, which is the right thing to do, I think, because this is not our dispute. This is not our problem. This is a problem between the United States and China. We should not get involved. We should just say, no, we want to be friends with the United States. We want to be friends with China. And if the majority of the countries in the world say that, then clearly the United States or China cannot succeed in creating a global alliance against each other. Although I must say that the European states, which used to be more neutral in this contest between the United States and China, because they had good defense and security links with the United States, but they did more trade with China. After the Ukraine war, the Europeans have moved closer to the United States and moved closer to the United States, even in the US-China geopolitical contest. So I think that's the view of most countries in the world. Now, let me therefore come to the last part. How do we prevent worst case scenarios? And here I want to go back to the point that I made at the very beginning of this lecture. And the point I made is that wars like Ukraine happen when you don't understand geopolitics. So therefore, we in Southeast Asia, we face the most danger of a war between the United States and China, because it could happen here in Southeast Asia. So therefore, we must make a strong effort to prevent a worst case scenario between the United States and China. So what we should do, and this is what I say in the last chapter of my book, I hope you read the last chapter of my book carefully, where I say that we should explain to US and China that they should work with each other. And I give at least 2 reasons why they should. I give 5 reasons, but I'll mention 2. 2 reasons why they should work with each other. First thing is that the world now faces major global challenges. As you know, we are still fighting COVID, and we are also still fighting climate change. Now, COVID and climate change cannot be fought by one country or 2 countries. The whole world must come together to unite to fight COVID and climate change. And so therefore, because we face common problems, bigger problems, US and China and ASEAN and the whole world should come together and cooperate to fight these common global challenges. So that's one point. And the second point is that if the goal of the United States is to improve the well-being of its people, right? And as I said, the United States is becoming a plutocracy. I should add, the United States is the only major developed country where the average income of the bottom 50% has been going down, not going up, you know. So there are lots of unhappy people in America. So if the goal of the United States is to improve the well-being of its people, and if the goal of China is to improve the well-being of its people, they should be cooperating and working with each other and not fighting each other in this US-China geopolitical contest. So therefore, we in Southeast Asia, we should not be passive. We should not be quiet. We should speak up, especially when Indonesia chairs the G20 meeting this year. And I think it's good that Indonesia is chairing the G20 meeting this year, because Indonesia is a big country. Indonesia can speak confidently. So I hope at the G20 meeting this year, one big message that Indonesia can convey on behalf of the whole world to both US and China is, please press the pause button. Please stop your fighting. We have more important things to do in this world. So if any of you are advising the Indonesian government for the G20 meeting, that is what you can tell the Indonesian government to do when the G20 leaders meet in Indonesia later this year. So with that, let me stop here, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Let's give a round of applause, big one, for Professor Kishore Mahbubani. So Dean, there's been a lot of questions here that we are collecting so far from the audience, not just from the participants of the program, but also some people who have asked some questions on Zoom. By the way, if you are on Zoom and not in the class, you'd like to ask some questions, please go ahead and write your questions there. But as the moderator, I have the privilege of asking the first question, and I will ask about your thoughts on how might this Ukraine war end? What are the likely scenarios, and what could other countries that are a bit far off from there, such as those in Southeast Asia, what could we do to help speed up the process that we reach an end of peace over there? Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a very, very good question. I was in Davos, I mentioned earlier, where I met Minister Airlangga Hartarto. And in Davos, I asked everybody this question. And these are the world experts, the world experts. And I said, how will this war in Ukraine end? And they said they don't know. Because there are at least three possible scenarios. Scenario number one, Ukraine wins. So Ukraine expels the Russian forces from Ukraine, and because it gets a lot of support from the rest of the world. And as you know, so far, the Ukrainian forces have been fighting quite well. And you must have seen that yesterday, the leaders of Germany, France, and Italy visited Ukraine to show their support for them. So that's one possibility. The other possibility, of course, is that Russia could win, because Russia is still, at the end of the day, a bigger power than Ukraine. There's more people than Ukraine. It has more military weapons than Ukraine. So maybe Russia can win. But so far, as you know, Russia is not winning in a very big way. In fact, in the early part of the war, the Russian military forces did very, very badly. So that's another possibility. Russia could win. Or the third possibility is for them to have a compromise. And the compromise, by the way, you can Google and you can go to my website. I've said in some of my speeches, you can find them on my website, that this Ukraine war could have been avoided if NATO had decided not to open the door for admission of Ukraine. That was Russia's main objection. And if you don't believe me, please go to YouTube and listen to a lecture by a professor in the University of Chicago his name is John Mearsheimer. John Mearsheimer. Mearsheimer. So please watch his YouTube. By the way, his lecture has been watched 29 million times on YouTube. 29 million times. Watch his lecture. And you will see, he says the war could have been avoided if NATO did not try to expand and include Ukraine. So clearly there's possibility for compromise also. But right now, I can tell you that Ukraine doesn't want to compromise. Russia doesn't want to compromise. United States doesn't want to compromise. So unfortunately, the best solution, a compromise solution, is not going to appear very soon, sadly. I mean, I wish it would appear soon, but it's not going to appear very soon. So that's the tragedy. And sadly, more people from Ukraine will die as the war carries on, very sadly. And that's why, as I keep saying, we in Southeast Asia, we must avoid a war in Southeast Asia. And also, by the way, you can also go and Google. This is why I have launched something called the Asian Peace Program. The Asian Peace Program. Have a look at it and see what we can do to support peace in Southeast Asia, because we do not want a war like Ukraine in Southeast Asia, because when wars start, it's easy to start a war. It's very difficult to stop a war. So we must make sure that we do not start wars in Southeast Asia. So, and I can answer your question, Mulya, nobody knows what is going to happen in Ukraine.
Thank you, Prof. Hopefully we'll find a solution soon. But in the meantime, let's go back to Asia. We have a couple of questions about the Belt and Road Initiative. So if you don't want, maybe we take two questions at once because they're very related. And kita panggil Mas Haryadi Wiryawan sama Mas Paulus. They have questions about the Belt and Road. We'll take both of them at the same time. Please go ahead.
Okay. So, Professor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So lately, I was working with some Chinese government that they have some kind of like Belt Road Initiative. Maybe you know about their Belt Road Initiative. And they also implement those Belt Road Initiative in Indonesia. And I was also one of the team leaders to have the responsibilities to overcome all of the problems in Indonesia and smoothen their road to become a connected Belt Road Initiative from Indonesia to China and then China also to Africa. And I was wondering if we looking back to the Sri Lanka case, nowadays we looked at they were called by the news that Sri Lanka was going to be a bankrupt countries, and later the World Bank also informed us that there will be another 60 countries that will go bankrupt. Is there any related issue between the 60 countries that will go bankrupt with the Belt Road Initiative? Because as I see that some of those 60 countries, they also have their Belt Road Initiative from China. Is there any relation from that? Because it was really my concern because they already put their marks on each of every countries in the world using those Belt Road Initiative, including in America also. Because I have direct communication with some of the officials from China, and they said that they will continue their Belt Road Initiative, just looking back to their own roots before, because they're already successful building the Belt Road Initiative when they're using to as an economy, but now they are using it as a politics. So I was wondering, is there any relation to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Haryadi. And we'll take another one from Paulus.
Ya.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nanti minta tolong diterjemahin Pak Mul.
That's okay, I will translate, no problem.
Terima kasih atas kesempatannya. Selamat pagi. Good morning, Mr. Kishore. My name is Paulus Arwan from North Sumatra. Pertanyaan saya terkait dengan One Belt One Road juga, OBOR, yaitu seberapa besar pengaruh keikutsertaan Indonesia mengikuti OBOR dan apa efeknya ke Indonesia dan bagaimana Amerika memandangnya, bagaimana Amerika memandang keikutsertaan Indonesia terkait proyek itu. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Paulus. So the question was, thank you for the questions. So the question was, what is the impact on Indonesia being a part of the One Belt, One Road initiative, and how does the US see that? So two questions on the Belt and Road initiative.
Yeah. Well, number one, if you read all the Western literature on Belt and Road Initiative, it's all negative. So you will, if you read the Anglo-Saxon newspapers, if you read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the Economist, you will not get any positive stories on the Belt and Road Initiative, because this is part of the what I call the propaganda war against China. But there is an American academic who has studied this matter very carefully. Her name is Deborah Brautigam. Brautigam, I think, is spelled Brautigam. Brautigam. Please Google her, Deborah. Please Google Deborah Brautigam, and you will get a very long paper with lots of data examining whether or not China is carrying out what the West calls debt trap diplomacy. So the Western criticism of China is that China is giving you lots of money, making you borrow lots of money, and then you cannot pay, and then you are indebted to China, so China can control you. So that is a danger, right? But she says in this paper that all these stories are not true, not true. And in the case of Sri Lanka is in trouble, but Sri Lanka is in trouble not because of its loans to China. Its loans to China are only 10% of the total loans of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka hasn't managed its finances very well, right? And any country that doesn't manage its finances very well will get into trouble. So you are very lucky in Indonesia. You have a strong finance minister, Sri Mulyani. And as you know, she has worked at the World Bank too. So when you have a strong finance minister and you control your reserves carefully, you will not get into trouble. So for example, I think the Indonesian projects in the Belt and Road Initiative, for example, you take the Jakarta-Bandung Railway that is being built as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. If after it is built, if it is well managed, and if you charge the right amount for the tickets, right, you will recover the cost of the capital expenditure. And the Jakarta-Bandung Railway will boost economic activity. The value of land near the railway is going to go up. Because when you have a fast train, you can do more things. You can invest more things in that area. So therefore, the economic gains from the Jakarta-Bandung Railway will be more than the economic costs of the Jakarta-Bandung Railway. So, but this requires the Indonesian government to manage it very well. And many countries have managed their projects well. So you will read about the failures of the Belt and Road Initiative in the Western newspapers. You will not read about the successes. So let me give you two examples of successes. For example, there's a country called Tajikistan. It's got mountains in the middle. So the people from one side of Tajikistan had to drive up the mountain, drive down the mountain. It took several days to travel from one side of Tajikistan to the other side of Tajikistan. But in 900 days, the Chinese built a tunnel underneath the mountains. And now you can go across the country in 900 seconds. Look at that. It used to take several days to go over the mountains. But because of the Chinese tunnel, the country is connected. So this is a success story. Nobody tells you about it. And then if you want another success story, it's interesting that the world's oldest democracy in some ways is in Greece. Greece is the world's oldest democracy. Greece is a member of NATO. Greece is an ally of the United States. But there's a Greek port, Piraeus, which is part of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is very successful, which is making a lot of money. So I would say that when you read articles on the Belt and Road Initiative in the Western media, you must be skeptical of these articles and check and double check them. And in my book, Has China Won? I give some data to show how much of the propaganda against the Belt and Road Initiative is not true. And I want to emphasize one point. In this world, there are 193 countries, right? Every country is free to choose whether or not to join the Belt and Road Initiative. And some countries don't want to join. Japan doesn't want to join, United States doesn't want to join, Australia doesn't want to join, India doesn't want to join, and then they have a right not to join. It's their decision. But out of 193 countries, 140 countries have decided to join the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, let me ask you a simple question. Are these 140 countries stupid? Are you saying that the majority of countries in the world are stupid countries because they joined the Belt and Road Initiative? Or are they made calculations that they can benefit from it? So I would say that if countries don't want to join the Belt and Road Initiative, they should not join. But if you want to join, you should be allowed to join. Every country should be free to decide. But of course, when you join, you must make sure that you have good finances and manage your financial situation well. And that is something that's the responsibility of the country that has joined the Belt and Road Initiative. And to the best of my knowledge, all the ASEAN countries have joined the Belt and Road Initiative, and all the ASEAN countries are benefiting from the Belt and Road Initiative. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you very much, Professor Mahbubani. Do you, just as a follow-up question to that, because we're very exposed to Western media, right? So what are some of your suggestions for non-Western media that our participants here could regularly read, as well as, you know, reading the Western media? Do you have any suggestions on some that could go into our regular reads?
It's very, very difficult, very difficult. But I would say one possibility, there are two, in English, there are two newspapers, I would say, that are a bit more balanced. One is the Singapore Straits Times, and the other is the Hong Kong South China Morning Post. So I write for Singapore Straits Times, I write for the South China Morning Post, and they tend to have more balanced articles on China. They have also critical articles on China, of course. They don't just praise China all the time, but they also have articles that are a bit more balanced than what you find in the Anglo-Saxon media. So those are two potential sources.
All right, thank you. We'll go on to the next set of questions. We have a question from Margareta. She's from Bali. Please go ahead.
Check.
Good morning, Professor Kishore.
Good morning.
I'm Margareta from Bali, and it's been an honor for me to discuss with you. And Head of States and Government Summit will take place in October 2022 in Bali, right? But under the Indonesian presidency, the G20 will focus on the theme Recover Together, Recover Stronger. But Secretary Janet Yellen said on Wednesday that the United States would not be participating in group of 20 meetings. So what is your opinion? Will we change the theme, or because it's like it's not possible, like recover stronger, recover together for Indonesia? Thank you.
Well, I don't know whether the United States has made the final decision to join the G20 meeting. I mean, I know that United States is putting pressure on Indonesia not to invite Russia to the G20 meeting. But you know, Indonesia is only the host. You know, you are providing your house for the G20 meeting. But the G20 belongs to the 20 countries. It doesn't belong to Indonesia. So I would advise Indonesia to consult all the G20 countries and see whether the majority want Indonesia to include Russia or to exclude Russia. And you know, if you look at it quite seriously, the European countries and United States want to exclude Russia. But United States and Europe, if you add up the population of United States and Europe, it only comes to 700 million people, right? But if you add up the list of other countries, you add up the population of China, of India, right? Of Brazil, of Mexico. These countries are not saying exclude Russia. So if you take if you judge countries by the weight of their population, the most populous countries in the world are saying, please invite Russia, because you must talk to Russia. If you want a solution for Ukraine, you cannot get a solution by excluding Russia. So I think it's very unreasonable of the United States to ask Indonesia to exclude Russia, because it is not Indonesia's decision. You should ask the United States to talk to the members of the G20 and ask the members of the G20 whether Russia should be included or not included. Now, as you know, China, the world's largest democracy is India, it's not United States. So why doesn't the United States consult the world's largest democracy? Because United States says the democracies in the world don't want to invite Russia. That's not true. India wants to invite Russia. So I think it's important, therefore, to get the other G20 countries to speak out on this matter. And so Indonesia should say, it's not up to us to decide. It's up to the members of G20 to decide. And Indonesia should ask the other G20 countries to speak to the United States and give the United States their views. And I hope that the United States will learn to listen to the rest of the world and not make decisions unilaterally on this subject. And I also think it's in the interest of the United States to actually get Russia to come to the G20 meeting, because when President Putin comes, he will hear lots of countries saying, stop the war in Ukraine. And that's the best way of telling President Putin when he comes to Indonesia. So therefore, I think the United States is making a strategic mistake in trying to exclude Russia. It should listen to the world's largest democracy, which is India, and invite Russia to the meeting.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. All right, Margareta. Now, I will go on to the next person to ask the question. He's Mirza. He's actually a professor based in Aceh. So, Mirza, please. Okay.
Check. Hi, hello, Prof. Mahbubani. Thanks for geopolitic knowledge today. I have a question. How opinion Indonesia position?
I can't hear.
Check, you can hear?
Now I can.
Yes. How your opinion about Indonesia position on global politics stage post-war between Russia and Ukraine? There's foreign Indonesia policy is impartial or non-block or free and active policy. Thank you.
Well, I think I'm not, thank you for the question. I'm not an expert on Indonesia's position on Ukraine, but I think from what I know, Indonesia is taking the right position on Ukraine. So, for example, as you know, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is illegal under international law. And so the United Nations General Assembly, 140 countries voted to say that this invasion of Ukraine is illegal. And certainly Indonesia voted in favor of that resolution also. And so Indonesia's position under international law is a correct position. The invasion is illegal. But at the same time, I think Indonesia has also tried to play a helpful role by talking to everybody. Now, as you know, you cannot make peace if you don't talk to the people. And so if the war today is between Russia and Ukraine, You must talk to Ukraine and you must talk to Russia. So I think it's very good that Indonesia has invited the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, to come to Indonesia for the G20 meeting. And I think it's also good, as I said earlier, that Indonesia has invited the president of Russia to come for the G20 meeting. And then we hope that at the G20 meeting, President Putin and President Zelensky can speak to each other and try to find a solution. So I would say that Indonesia, the best position that Indonesia can take, it can say, yes, the invasion is illegal, but it can also play a helpful role as a diplomatic mediator between Russia and Ukraine, because that's what people expect the chairman of G20 to do so. So when Indonesia takes on the chairmanship of G20, there's a certain responsibility that comes with it. And so I would encourage, therefore, Indonesia to speak to Ukraine and speak to Russia and see whether or not ways and means can be found to stop the war in Ukraine. So that would be my suggestion for Indonesia.
All right, thank you, Prof. The next one I will call Raja Jayadinata from Riau.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Professor Kishore. I am Jaya from Riau, the middle of Sumatra. So, our post-COVID-19 geopolitical conditions have certainly made the third world burden in seeking an economic rebound. Coupled with the many policies that changed after Russia-Ukraine experienced a war, which led to several policy changes. So the question is, in point 3 ago, Professor Kishore talks about global governance, where many countries, economic and politics are affected by it. Therefore, what kind of scheme can be done for the third world countries to grow after this COVID situation? And what kind of global policies needs to be applied to make it stable again? Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, thanks. Did you get
Thank
that,
you.
Prof? Yeah.
I think the question was about what can the third world countries do, right?
Yes,
To grow
and what global policies are needed to recover?
Yeah. Okay, good. That's a very, very good question. By the way, Riau is also very near Singapore.
Yes, it is. Neighbor.
Yeah, the neighbor of Riau. So I love to go to the Riau region. Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize. I haven't covered this because I didn't speak about it. That the world today is experiencing a very, what they call a perfect economic storm. And if you want to know about it, in yesterday's Straits Times, Mulia, in yesterday's Straits Times, there's an article by the senior minister of Singapore, Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, who's one of the most highly respected economists in the whole world. Tharman Shanmugaratnam is his name. I think you know him, Mulia. Look for the article and please share that article with all the participants in this program, because he explains very clearly that we are facing a terrible global economic situation because of a conjunction of many forces. Number one, COVID has brought down the world economy. Number two, inflation is damaging the world economy. Number three, Ukraine war is damaging the world economy. So there are many forces damaging the world economy. And so therefore, this is why the G20 meeting is in Bali is so important, because the last time when the world had a major global economic crisis in 2008, 2009, it was a G20 leaders meeting in London, which saved the world. So if you want to stimulate the global economy and get it to grow, all the economies in the world must jointly stimulate the world economy. And the only way they can jointly stimulate the world economy is if they come together and discuss it at the G20 meeting. So just as the London meeting in 2009 helped the global economy, this is why it's important for the G20 leaders to all come to Bali for the meeting later this year, because then you need a joint stimulus package from all the major economies in the world, including United States, Europe, China, Japan, ASEAN, and everybody. So this is why you need to have the G20 leaders meeting, because no one country, I want to emphasize this point, the world economy is so big, we are so interdependent, no country can save the world. We must all come together. So for the third world countries, and the question was about the third world countries, for the third world countries in Africa, for the third world countries in Latin America, and for the third world countries in Asia, we must persuade the G20 to come together and work on a joint stimulus package. And that will be the way to help the third world countries grow their economies.
Right. Thank you very much, Prof. I've shared the article by Minister Tharman. It's titled "Confronting a Perfect Long Storm." It's going to be a good read for all of us. So, friends here, so we are nearing the end of our lecture, and I would like to invite Professor Kishore Mahbubani to give some closing statements to Indonesia's young politicians. Some of them here are already holding strategic positions in their respective areas, and many more will be participating in the upcoming elections in 2024, and we're hoping to see many more of them holding strategic positions in the government. So I would like to invite you to give closing statements to our participants as well as audience on the way forward, please.
Thank you. Well, for a start, let me thank you all for inviting me to come and address you all. And let me close by saying that I've described to you all the problems, all the challenges we face in global geopolitics, on Ukraine war, and on the US-China geopolitical contest. I've described to you the problems that we face on the economic front, also globally, and why the G20 meeting is important. But I think it's also important for us to count our blessings. What are the strengths that we have? So number one, the one blessing we have, which we haven't mentioned at all so far, is the fact that Southeast Asia has the second most successful regional organization in the world after the European Union. And that second most successful regional organization in the world is called ASEAN. And by the way, I wrote a book on it. I can show you. It's called The ASEAN Miracle. And it's been translated into Bahasa. You can read it in Bahasa Indonesia. I would say that ASEAN is responsible for the success of the 10 countries of Southeast Asia. And we should strengthen ASEAN as much as possible. And in fact, as I explained in the book, it was Indonesian leadership that created ASEAN. It was Indonesian leadership that strengthened ASEAN. So I hope Indonesia will continue to provide leadership of ASEAN. As you know, the ASEAN Secretariat is based in Jakarta. So in some ways, the heart of ASEAN is in Jakarta. So it's important, therefore, for us to realize that ASEAN is a blessing, because if you look at it, I mean, look at South Asia, look at other regions in the world, right? In South Asia, India and Pakistan cannot do normal trade with each other. I mean, ASEAN has got free trade agreements. India and Pakistan cannot do normal trade. You go to Gulf region, Saudi Arabia and Qatar cannot talk to each other, right? So you go to so many regions in the world and you have problems among the neighbors. And if you have problems among the neighbors, it's very difficult to get things done. So I think we should therefore be grateful that we have the ASEAN miracle in Southeast Asia. Number two, I think most of the governments in Southeast Asia, with the exception of Myanmar, okay, Myanmar is having problems and it will take some time to solve Myanmar's problems. But by and large, the ASEAN countries have good governance. And the good governance in Southeast Asia is a result of what I call three factors, which you can find on my website. The way you get good governance, and I've given the lecture, I think the Gorkha also once before, is through practicing MPH, meritocracy, pragmatism, honesty. MPH, meritocracy, pragmatism, honesty. So I hope that the Golkar Institute will promote the values of meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty, because that's how you get good governance. So, and that's why this course that you are doing is a very important course, because you have to keep on learning. And finally, the final point I would make is that we in ASEAN should, in response to this global geopolitical situation, we should not be passive. We should continue to talk to the Americans. We should continue to talk to the Chinese. We should continue to talk to the Indians. We should continue to talk to everybody and say that for the next 10 to 20 years, let us focus on the dealing with the global challenges, dealing with COVID, dealing with climate change, dealing with global economic turbulence. And so if unfortunately, the West no longer does that sort of thing. So we in ASEAN, we must be prepared to take on greater leadership role in managing these challenges. And that's why I'm glad that the Golkar Institute is developing the next generation of leaders, because we need new leaders to come up with new voices to deal with the problems of the world. So congratulations on this course, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you all.
A big round of applause for Professor Kishore Mahbubani, everyone. And of course, Dean, we are very grateful to have you here as an advisor for Golkar Institute to continue our education in creating the greatest leaders that Indonesia could have now and also in the future. So we're very thankful for that. Let's continue to keep in contact. We'll continue to learn from you, of course. We'll invite you to come to Jakarta next time. And please have a good rest of the day. Be successful in your activities and your books, upcoming books. We're always very eager to read your thoughts in the future. Thank you very much, Professor Kishore.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Teman-teman semua, kita telah berada di akhir dari public lecture ini dan kita akan break sebentar, ada waktu 5 menit ya, karena Pak Akbar Tanjung tentunya Ketua Dewan Kehormatan Golkar Institute telah ada di sini dan kita akan mengikuti sesi berikutnya dalam 5 menit. Jadi silakan kalau ada yang perlu ke toilet atau ambil makanan, ambil kopi, silakan bisa kembali langsung ke kelas. Kita ketemu 5 menit lagi. Terima kasih.